Alright, let's talk about wave management. Wave management is probably one of the most important things you need to understand if you are going to succeed on Vayne top. I'm going to explain everything from the blue side, so if you're on red side, just flip it the other way. Let's start off with the first 3 minion waves in top lane. So generally speaking, in top lane, you'll normally control this brush, or even this one, when you are starting off the game. The first minion wave will come, and it will meet at this point right here. When you are here, you want to zone your opponents and poke them with the brush strategy by attacking them, entering the brush to reset the aggression, and zone them, and make sure you land all your last hits. From here, if you do that, naturally the wave will push towards them because you're hitting your minions and they are not hitting their minions. So wave number 2 will now show up. So wave number 2 is here, and this is where you continue the process, keep poking, keep zoning, make them lose the gold, and then from here, when the last minion of wave 2 is about to die, you'll rotate down here, last hit the last minion, and then quickly go ward. It can be here, it can be here, but the point is that this ward is to watch out for any early cheese ganks while you are pushing wave 3, which is a cannon wave. So now wave 3 will come, and wave 3 will normally be around right here. This is where you start hard shoving the wave. Make sure you continue poking them off the wave if possible, and you want to crash the wave. Now after you crash the wave, what do? There's a lot of options. You can do what a lot of people talk about, which is cheater basing. This is where you crash the third wave, you base while they're dealing with that wave, and even if they hard shove the fourth wave back, you'll get back on time to catch the wave. But generally speaking, when you come back, your opponents will be building up a 2-wave crash back. So they'll be using wave 4 and wave 5 on the way back. So wave 4 will be about here, and wave 5 will be about here. When the wave is bouncing back, you want to shave the wave as much as you can, but not to the point where it pushes back towards your opponent, but to the point where it's pushing towards you, but as slow as possible. And your main objective is to hold a freeze or golden wave positioning, which is what I'll talk about later on. So that is the first option, which is cheater basing. The next one is your opponent's was really bad, and you're able to get them low enough, so now you can just solo suicide dive. You can start off with an auto, back off from the tower, and then go in hard with your condemn and everything, and then just kill your opponents, and even if you die, it's still worth it, because your opponent loses a couple minions, and if they don't have teleport, they lose a lot of minions, and you got the kill, you already got all the minions, you're in a good spot. So that is another option. Another option is to dive with your jungler if you have a duo queue partner who's willing to skip camps to make the early dive work. It won't work too often with solo queue junglers, so just keep that in mind. And next up, the most common one is to poke your opponents underneath the tower, or the tower itself. So this one's really straightforward. You poke your opponents, pop out of the tower range, poke them if they're walking up for the mage minions, and you repeat the process. Something to keep note of when you're choosing these options is you have to look at where the enemy jungler starts. If the enemy jungler is pathing top, and your jungler is pathing bot, you have to cheater base, because you're probably going to get ganked, unless you want to get ganked and try to 1v2. If your jungler is pathing top, and their jungler is pathing bot, then you can stay and poke your opponents, because the enemy jungler is moving away from you. And there's a lot of other little variations of whether both junglers are pathing top, both junglers pathing bot. I won't get too in-depth with it, but that is the general idea when it comes to deciding on how you're going to play your first 3 waves and after it crashes. A quick little honorable mention I want to call out is the 4-wave crash. This is very common if your opponents are able to clear some of the minions, and naturally you'll be able to stack up the 4th wave here and then crash the wave from there. And this is just another little variation. Nothing changes too much, but I just wanted to include that if that ever does happen to you. Next up, I want to talk about, for the first 15 minutes, a cannon wave spawns every 3 waves. This is very important because the wave management in the first 15 minutes will dictate whether you are in a good position or not. So let's start off with a 3-wave standard crash into base. So, normally speaking, a wave will build up around here. This is where cannons will meet. And then from here, you're able to stack up the 2nd wave, which is going to come, assuming you only last it, and it'll be around here. And then now, you stack up the 3rd wave, which is another non-cannon wave, about here. And then you can crash the wave, and then make your decision on whether you want to base, whether you want to move for an objective, whether you want to poke them on a tower, or whatever that may be. So that is the most standard 3-wave crash that you can get, is when it starts off with a cannon. Next, sometimes you'll run into weird variations where you'll start off by stacking up a non-cannon wave, and then the 2nd wave will be a cannon wave. These are all little weird variations that you may occasionally run into, and you just have to adapt and make your decision on how you want to play it out, because generally speaking, you don't want to be pushed up in the lane, hard shoving a cannon wave because it's going to take too long, opening you up to getting ganked or having issues pushing because you're playing Vayne. So just keep that in mind, but if it does happen, adapt, make sure you ward, and get ready to play according to what situation comes up. Next up, let's talk about the 2-wave non-cannon crash. This is very standard. If a cannon has just been cleared and you are playing with 2 non-cannons, as I just said, let's start off with you opening up with a cannon here, non-cannon here. You have a non-cannon wave here, and you notice there's a second non-cannon wave coming. You don't want to do a 3-wave crash, because if you do a 3-wave crash, you'll have non-cannon, non-cannon, cannon. And then if you're crashing on the cannon wave, as I said, you're not going to be sitting there pushing for a long time. So you want to crash on the 2 non-cannon wave. So let's say this is a non-cannon, right? You want to try to aim. There's multiple ways you can aim this wave. You can aim so that the second non-cannon wave is meeting here. The advantage here is that you are in a safer position from jungler ganks. But the disadvantage is the wave will take longer to crash if you're trying to escort it all the way in. If you play the second non-cannon wave here, the advantage is that you can crash the wave very quickly because it's very close. However, the disadvantage is you are now very open for ganks since you're this far pushed up. So you have to make your decision based on where you know the enemy jungler is and what risk you're willing to put in on where you're going to put the wave so that you can do a 2 non-wave cannon crash. Now, let's talk about single wave crashes. Single wave crashing is what people think Vayne does all the time, and sometimes you do it, but generally speaking, you do it in matchups that are really easy, and regardless of the status of the wave, whether it's a cannon or non-cannon, you're pretty much just hard shoving 24/7. You probably have your pink wards placed, you have your yellow wards placed, and you're just poking your opponents over and over again. So that is a possibility if you know you can 1v2 the enemy jungler and top laner, and repeatedly do that. Next up, let's talk about when the opponents start building up waves towards us. When your opponents are building up waves, you generally want to try to shave the waves as much as you can. So they will do their 1, 2, 3 back towards us, or 1, 2, and you want to try to shave it down without getting in a position where they can even engage. So you have to be very mindful of where they're standing. If they're standing in a position that's pretty far back and they're clearing the minions, and you can slap in a couple autos on the melee minions, then you should look to do that. However, if they're very far postured up, very aggressive, you can walk up and ego it, but generally speaking, you probably want to sit back and let them just crash the wave. But the point is by shaving the wave that's pushing towards us, you want to shave it in a way where it's always pushing towards us, but as slowly as possible. And that will open it up, deja vu, for you to hold the wave in the golden wave or freezing position. And that is a position that's good because you're close to your tower, where you're able to poke your opponents and they can't really jump on you out of fear of the tower. And you can continue just shaving the wave there, keep holding the wave here, and melee champions will have a lot of issues with you when it comes to that part of the lane. The only thing you have to worry about is ganks from behind you or from this brush. And pretty much your objective is to hold the wave here as long as you can and make your opponents make uncomfortable decisions where you're able to poke them down, and then eventually you're able to ghost them down, flash them down, kill them, and then either shove the wave or look to just take a base. Keep in mind, when you are trying to reset minion aggression in this position, there's no real way to do it since you don't have brushes. Your best bet is just to try to auto attack them and then try to just move backwards. Keep in mind of pulling minions too close to the turret. Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you don't want to do it. It just really depends. Be flexible and keep adapting to your situation. Next up, let's talk about basing while the wave is pushing towards us. So generally speaking, this will happen when you solo kill someone on the enemy team, or they just force base and the wave is pushing towards you. It's going to take way too much work as Vayne to hard shove that wave that is pushing towards you, then hard shove the next wave that is on the way, who knows whether it's a cannon or not, and then base. Because by the time you do that, they're probably coming back from their base, they're fresh with full HP, full items, they are going to demolish you. So what do we do in this situation? What we have to do is look at the amount of minions they have, and look at the amount of minions we have, and look at the next wave that's coming. Your objective is to shave down the wave, again, not to the point where it's pushing back towards them, but in a way where it's pushing towards us still, but we're able to base while the wave is pushing towards us, and we can still come back in time to catch the wave as it crashes, or even have it still frozen when we come back. That, I'm not going to give any specific numbers for. You generally just want to look at both waves and make your decision on how many you think you need to shave so that you can get back in time, because if you shave too little, the wave might crash too quickly and you might lose a lot of minions. If you shave too much, you might actually push the wave back towards them. So you need to find that happy medium and go from there.